Part 11. One Last Look Down. The Absolute Point of No Return and the Sovereign Choice. Chapter 1. The Granite Edge of Finality in Weary Eyes. The sustained ascent from the high sheltering meadow, fueled by the solemn resolution of her farewell, had been a grueling, single-minded exertion across sheer rock faces, treacherous handholds, and vast expanses of exposed scree slopes. Now Elara's forward trajectory delivered her to a spatial location of definitive, irreversible commitment. She reaches now the point of no return, a geographic locus marked less by its coordinates and more by the immense, absolute psychological weight of its meaning. It was a granite ledge above the sloping rise, a narrow, wind-swept balcony of raw stone that offered a final, comprehensive, and uncompromising view of the entire world she had purposefully abandoned. This dramatic vantage point demanded a final, solitary reckoning, a deep check of immutable purpose against the terrifying reality of the scale of her task. This was the final lesson that she needs to learn before the peat would accept her fully, a lesson concerning the fundamental nature of absolute non-negotiable commitment. The immense gravity of the moment was reflected deeply in her weary eyes that now carried the profound physical fatigue of the long journey, the accumulated wisdom of the ancient journal, and the sudden sharp awareness of the catastrophic consequences of failure, not just for her, but for the legacy she carried. The profound, high-altitude silence was immediately broken by a nervous, complex, internal soundscape. The clarinet performs a winding trill, a rapid, intricate series of high notes that perfectly symbolized uncontrolled anxiety and self-doubt. It was a nervous, anxious sound that cannot rest, mirroring the agonizing flicker of self-doubt that now, at the ultimate threshold of the final ascent, began to surface and threaten her core resolve for a terrifying, agonizing fraction of time. The thought of turning back begins to spill into her consciousness, the visceral, primal urge to preserve the self, at all costs to retreat from the ultimate test. This urge represented the possibility to fail the future and forego the test, to exchange the monumental, hard-won truth for the mere biological safety of a retreat to the known, easy world. This fleeting moment of acute psychological fragility was the mountain's last, most subtle, and most penetrating test. Chapter 2. The Clarity of the Glockenspiel and the Fading Days. The winding, chaotic anxiety of the clarinet was instantly, sharply countered by a purely objective, unassailable sound. The Glockenspiel sounds simple, clear, and bright, a small, decisive, metallic intervention that precisely cut through the nervous tension and internal fog. It was a tiny chime that snaps her from the spell of self-doubt and pervasive fear, a sudden sharp injection of memory, logic, and external, transcendent truth. This sharp, resonant sound served as a sharp reminder of the hopeful light that had guided her from the very beginning, the light of her original, pure, uncorrupted ambition. The Glockenspiel was the auditory voice of the journal, the ultimate clarity of the ancient purpose recalling the story that the ancient writers tell, the historical necessity of restoring the cosmic observatory and reclaiming humanity's lost knowledge. Pulled back instantly from the brink of emotional collapse, Elara looked down, truly, seeing the immense valley for the very last time below. The valley shrinks to shades of gray, its complex, vibrant geography flattened by immense distance into an abstract, colorless pattern. Stripped of its vitality and its warmth, the village roofs are mere specks in the haze. The home and the community she knew reduced to visually insignificant points on a vast, indifferent canvas. The life she had lived, the ease she had known, felt utterly remote. Now the life she leaves behind upon this day, the life of common concerns and shared routines, belongs now to the slow and fading days, a realm of time, space, she no longer physically or spiritually occupied. The immense physical distance was now matched by an absolute, irreversible temporal and spiritual separation. The profound solitude of the ledge was broken only by the dynamic conflict of the elements. The wind pushes against her sturdy form a massive, continuous physical pressure that was the mountain's active, palpable voice. It felt as if the mountain tries to change her mind, using sheer physical force and cold to emphasize the sheer, monumental difficulty of the final unclimbed task. Yet Elara braced her body and held her ground. She stands defiant through the rising storm, the fierce, silent determination in her core, refusing to yield to the pressure she had consciously and definitively and leaves the safer, easier path behind. Her choice was no longer a provisional ambition. It was a completed, absolute commitment. Chapter 3. The final catharsis and the inner voice. The score accompanying this moment of final absolute decision was a masterful blend of acute resignation and renewed steely will. The music speaks of hesitation, brief, a perfectly captured, agonizing fraction of time, just before the initiation of the final act. This was a moment where the courage starts to crack, not due to external duress or environmental collapse, but due to the sheer crushing internal weight of total, singular accountability. The immense historical responsibility of the ancient quest, coupled with the profound, unshareable loneliness, triggered a sudden, overwhelming wave of grief, a final necessary cathartic lament for the complete loss of a simple, easy, and comfortable future. This powerful, fleeting grief was not a sign of ultimate weakness, but the final, required purification of her sovereign will. It was the complete emotional shedding of her former self before she sets her shoulder to the pack, a simple, definitive physical adjustment of the burden of her supplies and tools, marking the absolute psychological transition from passive contemplation to aggressive, focused action. The pack, heavy with the journal and essential equipment, was now merely an organic extension of her own, renewed, resolute body and purpose. Her physical reaction to this catharsis was immediate and defining. She breathes the air and sets her jaw in stone, taking a deep, purifying draught of the thin, sharp, high atmosphere. The panorama below, though immense and starkly beautiful, held the vista holds no power over her choice. The sight of the valley could no longer entice her to return, nor could the sight of the peak beyond compel her forward. The decision was entirely and solely internal, a matter of self-sovereignty. The external world had been decisively dismissed as a source of influence. She turns away and walks the path alone, moving toward the unseen plateau beyond the ridge, listening only to her inner voice. That voice, now utterly clear, pure, and unwavering in the silence, was the ultimate, solitary guide to the final ascent.